Inauguration Day and the pro-life landscape today on The Simple Truth. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of Saint Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com. Pam, welcome back to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
It is good to be with you, Jim. And it is a happy day. At least for me, it was a happy day this afternoon.
Yes, a good day. Yes, and great to be with you. And let's start actually, if you wouldn't mind. I'm sure a lot of folks already are familiar with you, but if maybe they're new to the program, maybe they're this would be their first introduction to you. Can you give a quick intro into your background, just to kind of let people know where you're coming from as we begin our discussion today?
Yeah, sure. So the fast version is I've been involved in the pro-life movement my entire life, and we all get involved for different reasons, Jim. But for me, it was my personal story that drove me in to working with women in crisis. My biological mother was 15 years old. She was in foster care in the state of Michigan. She was raped. And she chose to give me my life and my amazing family. I was adopted. I'm the oldest of 8 children, 7 of us adopted. And when I came to know more about the beginnings of my life, the fact that my birth mother was a foster child in her teens and that she was raped, I realized that had I been born in 1975 and not 1965, I would have most likely been killed by the state. And I've spent my life working with women in crisis because I really believe that what my birth mother needed in that horrible moment of trauma was someone to love her and help her and come alongside her and give her hope. Not to have me violently ripped from her womb to repay violence with more violence, but to come alongside and help. Abortion in the case of rape kills an innocent child, further damages the woman. The only person you've helped is the rapist. And it's a tragedy that all of our abortion laws and all our discussions around these issues typically come as, well, I'm against abortion. No, I wouldn't kill my child. But if it was rape, I mean, that is it is a tragedy, and typically children like me are thrown under the bus. But that really propelled me into working with women in crisis. And so, post college, I began to work in pregnancy centers. I ran a pregnancy center in Minneapolis for many years, and helping women, coming alongside women experiencing unintended pregnancy. And as a part of that, I began to speak out in schools and in churches about chastity and sexual integrity, because, of course, I would love girls to make a better choice before they end up running to that abortion clinic. And as you know, well over 80% of abortions are done on unmarried women. And so if we could kind of handle the chastity piece a little bit, we would be going a lot better way to protect our marriages and certainly to save lives of children. And then as a part of that, I started traveling and speaking and doing a lot of that. Come full circle when I moved to Florida and got back involved in the pregnancy center world, as well as continuing to some speaking. And then I am on the board for Personhood Florida, which is an organization here in Florida that is attempting to call for personhood for the unborn. So that's kind of the long deal there.
Outstanding. Yeah, thank you for that. And for folks that would like more, again, you can go learn more about Pam, her good work over at enlightencom.com. Also, we did do a Testimony Tuesday with Pam back in November of 2021. So you can go back and find that episode in the podcast or on YouTube channel or wherever. And that's phenomenal. She gets into sharing also the story about her conversion to the Catholic faith, as well as her impressive skills in memorizing the Bible in just amazing ways. So, phenomenal stuff, Pam Stenzel. And so, Inauguration Day today. What are your thoughts broadly as it's unfolding today, and how does it affect the pro-life landscape before us as you see it?
Well, obviously there have been a lot of things said. President Trump said about Florida back and about his support for only a 15-week ban, which is a disaster. But a lot of what we're seeing of what I consider either career politicians or, like President Trump certainly is not a career politician coming out of the business world, but he would have not considered him pro-life, I think, prior to him even running much in the 2016 election. So I think he was on board as he was educated, and he was properly educated in a lot of ways. But I think, I don't know, it's opinion probably, but they ran scared after the midterm election here and blamed the pro-life movement and pro-life cause on their losses midterm during the Biden administration. And then, of course, with all of these, after Dobbs went down and all of these states kicking back these laws to the states, it just the Democrats had nothing to run on. They had zero to run on, and so they tried to run on unlimited abortion. And so I think some of our career politicians, people who have been in the movement a long time, just kind of believe that being pro-life was a losing argument politically. But Jim, I personally believe that it is solely because as a pro-life movement, we have pushed and pushed and pushed this concept of reducing abortion and incrementalism and saying, well, Pam, we're never going to save 1 million babies a year from abortion. So wouldn't it be great if we could save 10,000 and we can all cheer it? Because, and then they used to throw the whole rape exception under the thing by saying, well, Pam, that's only 1% or 2% or whatever of abortions that take place, and so if you just agree that we can pass a law that says you can't have an abortion unless it was a rape conceived child, then you're going to save 97 or 98%. They throw some ridiculous number out there, and the reality is by throwing that 2% under the bus, you've negated your entire argument. You've negated, if you believe that abortion is the intentional killing of a human being, then why in the world would it matter how that being came into being? Why in the world would it matter if the baby can feel pain? All these ridiculous things. Oh, well, it's pain capable. And the way the pro-life community, and not all, but the vast majority, Jim, have behaved for the better part of 50 years has got us exactly where we are, where there really is no victory. And now we live in a state where even states that are supposedly pro-life governors, Republican, can pass laws that don't amount to the ending of very many abortions at all. A 5% decrease, a 10% decrease, and that's. And so it's just frustrating. I know we have to uniformly call for personhood. And the problem is it's not the other side. It's our side. It's the conservative side, the so-called pro-life side. We're not going to get Democrat support for personhood. We're not going to get Democrat support for a 15-week ban or a 6-week ban or pain capable. The Democrat that is not going to support any of that, period. And the problem is we got the pro-life side, conservative side wanting to, 15 weeks. Oh, pain capable. Oh, except for the case of rape. Oh, 6 weeks, except for the case of rape and trafficking. And we play this game and at the end of the day, not only we lose, but the babies lose and the moms lose that we're hurting. And we continue to have huge numbers of abortion, and now we have the abortion pill like the Wild West being sent in every state regardless of its laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of these areas today, I think. But the one thing that you bring up there, this argument about saying that, can't we just, we need to focus on just saving some of them. Aren't you just okay with that? And really, this has been the Democrat argument over the years. This has been the Clinton administration saying, well, we're in favor of reducing abortion. Now the Democrats have gone harder and they've gone even further, following that logic to say, well, now we're actually I guess we are pro-abortion. Now, they won't say it even that directly, but pretty much that's exactly what they're showing by their policy. And the real strong leftist pro-abortion folks, I don't think they mind saying that they're pro-abortion and to celebrate it and everything else. And they're the ones that are really running the Democrat Party when it comes to abortion. So the Republicans have kind of adopted what used to be some of the Democrat rhetoric. In fact, in this last election, I even heard some Republicans saying, safe, legal, and rare, which used to be the Clinton thing as well. So it's disgusting to hear all of this, that this is where things are in the Republican Party. But that's it. And one of the things that I hear come up, one of the arguments I hear most popular on the Republicans that are soft on abortion, that aren't looking to end abortion, they'll say, well, we got to change hearts and minds. Look how bad it is that so many people are pro-abortion. We just have to focus on hearts and minds, and then maybe one day enough people will agree with us. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's crazy because, first of all, what you've done by the way you've communicated is you've said abortion's a bad thing if the baby can feel pain. Abortion's a bad thing if the baby was conceived in rape. Abortion's a bad thing unless accept, right? And what you've done is you said, these abortions are all okay. These excuses are all okay. And you've not just said, no, abortion is wrong. End of discussion, always and forever, no matter your accept.
Right, exactly. Where we have a very clear position. If we say, look, we're going to stand up for all innocent human beings, they can't be murdered. That's illegal without exception. We can't kill innocent human beings. We're no longer going to mass murder children. Child murder is going to end. No exceptions. That's a pretty clear position to take, and that ought to be the pro-life position to take. There is something interesting Trump said today. We're going to get into it when we get back. Stay tuned.
Tired of your phone bill supporting who knows what? iCatholic Mobile is a 5G provider that supports what matters to you. With iCatholic Mobile, every call, text, and even that group chat you can't escape helps support the Station of the Cross. It's a network that connects you to what's good for both your soul and your wallet. More information is available at iCatholicMobile.com. iCatholic Mobile underwrites with the Station of the Cross.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Pam Stenzel, EnlightenCom.com. And we're talking about Inauguration Day today and the pro-life landscape. I do want to get into something very interesting that President Trump said during his inauguration speech today that I think lines up with what we're talking about here. But first, I want to just finish up this discussion on, I guess, what some would call a principled incrementalism. And so in this idea, look, there are folks that will say, look, I agree with you. We need to end abortion. We need to end it. We need to get to the end of it. But we do need to chip away progressively at it. We do, we're not going to be able to get it all at once. So we do need to make these strategic moves forward. To that, I say there may be times to take a strategic move forward. But what I would also say is you can only do that if you're also always making the case, always clearly stating your position that, look, I'm taking this now because this is what we can get and let's take it. However, we're going for the end, and this is a step towards the end, and the goal is we're going to end this because it is murdering innocent human beings, and that is not okay. We cannot have a civilization where it's illegal to be murdering children. Probably most people aren't going to say it that strong and direct, but I say you got to state the goal. If you're going to take some sort of an incremental approach and take a step, you can only take that step if you're being clear in the logic that ultimately this is a step towards this goal. Now, I recently talked with a pro-life leader. I was on an email thread with this pro-life leader, and someone who says they believe in personhood and agree with the goal to end it, all of that, making a case for principled incrementalism. But they basically had sent out this open letter to Trump and the Trump administration about what they were hoping for. And it was very soft, very weak. I guess that's what this leader thought. This is all we can get right now. This was his idea of the strategic move based on his view of principled incrementalism. But nowhere in there did he state anything about personhood, anything about the goal of ending abortion. So I challenged him on it. And he openly told me, very honestly, I appreciate that, but he said, I think I need to keep it a secret. I think I need to hide the goal. I think it's actually strategic to hide the goal. And then even using an analogy in the Old Testament about the Hebrew midwives hiding things from Pharaoh in order to save some of the babies. I mean, it was a stretch, to say the least, apples and oranges comparison, but that's how he was trying to kind of tie it all together and make this huge leap. What is your view on, I guess, a so-called principled incrementalism? How do you see it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we have to define what principled incrementalism means. So it's not, we are going to have a 6-week ban with accept. That's not, because what you've done is you've given all these reasons that make abortion okay, and you've educated to that. A law like Texas passed and Georgia passed and Alabama passed, and I might get all the states wrong, that said we're gonna ban abortion at a heartbeat with 0 exceptions, nothing. That is more incrementalism to me, because you're being faithful to the reason why you don't want abortions, and that it's the taking of the life of an innocent human being. And what we've done, what a lot of the so-called pro-life laws have done that they call incrementalism. I'll give you an example. One of them was that women have to see an ultrasound prior to obtaining an abortion, and there would be a 24-hour waiting period. So that should be a principled incrementalist, if it was just that. An ultrasound is required and 24 hours, right? But many states, a few passed it cleanly, but many states, including my own at the time, Minnesota, passed it and said, except in the case of rape. So now what you've said is every woman who just gets pregnant because she was sleeping around has to see an ultrasound, but the woman who was raped doesn't have to see an ultrasound. And by doing that to every pro-life law that you attempt to pass in an incrementalist fashion, by taking certain babies and certain situations out of it and saying, but these don't count, you're consistently saying not only to the general public, to the pro-life community, but also to that mother who was raped, who if everything she's ever heard is that's the one case in which abortion is acceptable, that what you're actually doing is saying to her, I should be aborting my child, because clearly even people who think abortion is a horrible thing think that I should be the one aborting my child. So I think you have to be really careful about true principled and then you base your argument, Jim, on the fact that it is an intentional killing of a human being. Even the other side, I saw this comedian, not pro-life, not he starts mocking the pro-life people. He goes, some of you don't understand. They actually believe that that's a baby. They actually believe that's what's going on in that thing is a baby. And, if you really did believe that that was a baby, you would be doing everything you could to stop it too. But clearly most people don't believe it's a baby, because they've said there are all these times you can kill the baby. You can kill the baby if it's this way. You can kill the baby. It was right. They start using the exact argument saying, if these people actually believed that that was a baby, they would be behaving very differently. So they either A, must not believe it, or they just don't believe it. They believe, like we do, that it's a blob of tissue and it doesn't really have value. So what sometimes incrementalism basically, again, devalues the human person by its very the very law. The very law you passed devalued the human person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very well stated, and that also does bring to mind the clip we've played it a bunch here. Maybe I don't know, from 6 months to a year ago. Bill Maher, who's pretty much a big time liberal and quite foul mouthed. I wouldn't recommend him, but he did have this clip where he said something along the lines of what you're saying. This other comedian said, which was to say that, look, they don't hate women. Pro-lifers don't hate women. That's just a lie that pro-abortion people are spreading, pro-choice, so-called pro-choice people are spreading. And he said the truth of it, which is they believe it's murder. And it kind of is, he said. And yeah, more than kind of is. That's exactly what it is. But that logic makes sense. That logic makes sense to a common sense individual when you lay it out that way. And that's the way we absolutely need to lay it out. That's what the reality is. Pope St. John Paul II said so. Mother Teresa said so. Even Pope Francis has called it murder. It's nothing. It's nothing but just being honest about reality to call it what it is. We have an ongoing daily mass murder of our littlest brothers and sisters, and it has to end. And so your point here on a principled incrementalism, what is this? What are we talking about? There are limits even within that idea to say you can't ever use something as a step forward if it's undermining your entire argument because you're directly allowing some human beings, some innocent human beings to be killed by abortion. You can't parse it out like that. It undermines the whole argument. So you can't have like exceptions for rape and incest and say that, yeah, we can kill a child if, the circumstances of their conception, if there was an evil that led to the circumstances of their conception, which they are completely innocent of and it has nothing to do with them. But, the logic here is that, we can kill them in that case. We can murder them in that case. That's ridiculous, right? And so why would we ever agree to that logic? That's not a principled incrementalism. That's not only foolish, but it's also an evil, really. It's blood on our hands if we go along with something like that, versus what you're saying is if you're chipping away, though, and saying 6 weeks, a 6-week limit, that's what we can get right now, no exceptions, and that's what we're going to stand on as the next step, okay, or a parental notification or whatever it is, depending on, I guess, the politics of that given state, then there are some things that are permissible in a principled incrementalism and some things that are not. I think that's a very important distinction to make. Anything else you want to say on that?
Yeah, I would just agree with you again, and remember that laws like parental notification and 24-hour waiting periods and ultrasounds being required all throw barriers for every woman seeking an abortion, not just some women seeking abortion, right? And that's why I think you can stay principled with laws like that.
Yeah, it's very well said. And so look, what we want to see is all abortion ended, all child murder ended. We have great hope in looking at the trajectory of what has taken place, I would say, with the evil of slavery, that it was once legal. It was once baked into the culture as much as an evil can be baked into a culture. And because of abolitionists who were told, this is never going to end, and they pushed on anyway, got to the point where made it illegal in law, unthinkable in culture now in our time. Nobody's arguing in favor of the evil of slavery. That's where we need to go. That's the trajectory. We saw that it can be done with slavery, and that's where we need to push here with abortion. And it gets me thinking today on it's Inauguration Day, but it's also Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And he has this quote that's been coming to mind for me today: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And what I like about that is there's this sort of sense of inevitability to getting to the end of these evils, these terrible evils, just like slavery, now abortion, and to say that we can get there, we've got to put put the work in. It's not just going to happen. We have to put the effort in participation with God's grace. But there is a sense that it's inevitable if good people are willing to stand up and keep pushing. And that's where we are today, saying, let's push. Now is the time to push for personhood. We look at the landscape before us, and this is really an end move whose time has come. It's very hard to make excuses of why we need to keep waiting on this at this point. When we have Trump now in the office, once again, conditions are ripe for it. He could sign an executive order that would kick personhood to the Supreme Court very quickly. That's what we're calling him to do, and that's what we're hoping for. But what are your thoughts, I guess, on this? And I will share a Trump quote in just a minute from his inaugural address today. But what are your thoughts on this, I guess, in general, sort of as we see the possibility of a personhood executive order before us with President Trump?
That would be amazing, and I think that whatever it would take to get to the Supreme Court to make that determination. We talked about a law that was passed in Alabama, a Supreme Court ruling with IVF issues that they declared that a human being is a person from the moment of conception. And we're like, it can happen, and a Supreme Court can say that. And then everybody's got to fight over what does that mean for all of the other issues going around it. But what I would say is that we learned after the Dobbs was used as the decision that said we can't do anything about personhood because of this. We can only do it legislatively. Well, what happened when Dobbs fell is they all wanted to go back to doing it legislatively and refused to deal with personhood. And it's a wrong tactic. It was wrong then, but it's even more wrong now. We've proved that the whole legislative concept isn't going to work. It's never going to end abortion.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's exactly correct. Roe was used as such an excuse. And now in this post-Roe, post-Dobbs era, that excuse is off the table. Yet the same excuse makers are still making all kinds of excuses. They just use something else and say, oh, no, we got to keep waiting. We got to keep waiting. Again, MLK, I would recommend a great book called Why We Can't Wait. The same thing would apply today to abortion. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com, talking about Inauguration Day today, also MLK Day, and how the pro-life landscape looks as we head into 2025 here. And this text, Martin Luther King Jr., Why We Can't Wait. This copy I have also has a great quote right on the front cover here that says, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And in the case of abortion, of child murder, the one who is being most oppressed of all, the one who is being mass murdered every day, they have no voice. They can't demand it for themselves. They can't demand that freedom would be given to them, that their right to life would be given to them. It is up to us. So every now and then, as I get into these little arguments with folks on email threads or whatever else, oftentimes once their logic kind of breaks down and gets exposed, they'll say something like, "Who are you to demand anything of anyone? How dare you demand this of Governor DeSantis or the Supreme Court or Donald Trump?" And I guess the answer is just, I'm a human being, right? And there's a responsibility in our time when we are mass murdering children that I speak up on their behalf. So yes, I demand it on their behalf. I'm not, some great big influential person. If you are, what's your excuse for not doing it? This is our responsibility. I think that's probably the answer. Now, President Trump, interesting character for sure. Look, we owe it. We owe him some credit for sure. We want to give him credit, and I'm all for giving people due credit for the good that they've accomplished while still continuing to call them on and demand more to push on to the end of this ongoing daily mass murder. So I certainly give him credit. The Supreme Court justices that were put in place overturned Roe. Now, I would have liked to have seen them go further and actually affirm personhood in the 14th Amendment in that Dobbs decision. They didn't go that far, and they've made it clear certainly Kavanaugh did, that they don't really want to touch anything more on abortion if they can help it, which is why it has to be forced to the Supreme Court. A executive order from the president would do that. That's, to me, the most expedient way to make that happen, by one stroke of a pen. Also, Governor DeSantis or any deep red governor could sign an executive order for personhood in their state. That's going to trigger their Supreme Court, and that's going to ultimately trigger the United States Supreme Court. So there's many people who could use their influence to force the Supreme Court to have to answer this question once and for all. Who is the child in the womb? Of course, it's a scientific fact they're a human being. Are they a human person? Well, of course they are. Every human being is a human person. Therefore, under the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the laws for all persons. This applies to the unborn. This applies to the child in the womb. Abortion is unconstitutional. That's where we're trying to get. That's the answer from the Supreme Court, but we have to force them to do it because they don't want to touch it for political reasons or fear of what the repercussions would be, whatever. But we've got to push on. So President Trump today, in his inauguration address, is something of what I see. I think this communicates the opening that I see with Trump and his administration for something like an executive order. At least, look, we got to push him as far as we can possibly push him. Ultimately, I think executive order on personhood is wonderful. But again, we want to get as much as we can get. But this is what he said today in the inaugural address. He said, "Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense." It's all about common sense. To me, this is where this can make sense to him. If somebody close enough to him can lay this out to him in a common sense way, because after all, this is common sense. Anybody can understand it. We ought not be murdering innocent human beings. And this, let's take it out of the politics and give it to the Supreme Court to answer the question. It's their job to answer this question. Are there equal rights for the persons in the womb, or are they not? And if not, then explain to us how they're not persons. How is this human being not a human person affirmed by the 14th Amendment? And they have to answer that question then, which I don't think they could answer it in that way. So Trump talking about the executive orders that he's signing today on the southern border, the economy, censorship, military, and I think he's strong in this respect too, saying as of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. So that's a step in the right direction, right? That's common sense. But so is it common sense to say, if he were to say, as of today, we're not going to murder innocent human beings anymore. They're human beings from fertilization. It's a scientific fact. We're going to stop the ongoing daily mass murder, end the bloodshed. I'm calling on the Supreme Court to answer this question once and for all. Your thoughts, Pam, as you think about
Jim,
openings with Trump. Go ahead.
Yeah, but hear what we're saying, because you brought up the hearts and minds thing. If an executive order, the Supreme Court, let's say tomorrow, came down and said that a human is a person from the moment of conception with the rights of the 14th Amendment in the womb, child in the womb is a person, that there's no way that's going to change we still are going to have a lot of years to carry out to get to a place where we stop killing innocent human beings, right? The same way as when slavery was declared, when slaves were made free and they said they're not a fifth of a person, they're a full person. It took some years, even up to Martin Luther King, from those 1800, from Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King, where this got fleshed out in practice. See, so I think that the problem is people think that we're calling for the correct law in principle in order for then the practice of child killing to end. Right? But if you're never willing to take that first step, slavery would not have ended if Abraham Lincoln and the laws weren't changed in the late 1800s. But it took almost 100 years for them to begin to work their way into practice and hearts and minds. I hope that makes sense. So
Sure.
I think some of our people want to start with hearts and minds and then change the law rather than changing the law, which the law is the teacher for morality. So we change the law and then we work out and how that's going to look, and how we end the child murder. But it's not going to work the other way. I mean, that's my point. The other people have said for 50 years, we have to change hearts and minds, and then the law will change. No, we change the law, and then that changes hearts and minds.
Right. And the strategy for changing hearts and minds has not been too good. It certainly hasn't been that effective when you look at what the percentages are today and how many people support abortion. And they don't even understand what abortion is because the messaging has been soft. So that's not really working. The pro-life movement, the way that they're trying to change hearts and minds. And you'll hear pro-life speakers say this, things like, well, we can't worry about the law. We just have to change hearts and minds. The law is a teacher, as you said. There's no bigger lever to change hearts and minds than changing the law, especially in this respect at this time. If we get personhood, one executive order from President Trump would make this massive news overnight. As big a news as when the Dobbs leak came out, probably bigger. And that would totally change the debate, change the narrative to, is the child in the womb a human person? And that would get the question pretty quickly to, it's a scientific fact they're a human being. So what's the difference between being a human being and a human person? And there is no difference. Again, this is very common sense when you get into it. Sadly, the pro-life movement isn't leading on these things to change hearts and minds. But that is where we ought to be, right? This would change hearts and minds in a massive way. And also, yeah, you're right. What you're saying about it takes time then to flesh out. I was looking into it recently, and Lincoln signed the executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation, and some do call the executive order on personhood that is being proposed to Trump, and governors could do this as well, but they do call it the Lincoln proposal as kind of a callback to the Emancipation Proclamation, which was an executive order initially there to abolish slavery, but then it was 4 years later that it was enacted the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. Now, in this case, we already have the 14th Amendment about affirming personhood, so we can just apply the 14th Amendment. But ultimately, it would be a good idea, to take, it would take some years, maybe 4 years later would be a similar trajectory to get a new amendment that would explicitly state it without equivocation that the child in the womb is a human person with rights from fertilization. Let it be known so it could never be changed. But that takes time to change hearts and minds, where you have to get, I think, 75% of the states on board. But you can do that if you start pushing. And I think a lot of people would come to their senses if an executive order like that were signed on personhood, if the Supreme Court were taking it up. A lot of people would rethink this, especially just think of the leadership power of Trump alone with all the people that follow him, all the MAGA folks. He could change their hearts and minds on this overnight if he came out and said, hey, this is common sense. It's time to end this. Pam, your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Because then he's educating it to the core of the argument. The argument isn't whose life is valuable, a quality of life. Well, this person's going to end up in foster care and have a terrible life, so isn't it better to kill them? We get it clear and simple. This is a human being from the moment of conception. When is it okay to take an innocent person's life? And if your answer is never, then it's never. And I've said forever, the hearts and minds things, I want women to have every available option to them in an unintended pregnancy that does not involve the death of their child. And there are all kinds of things that we can do. There's all kinds of support systems. There's adoption. There's safe haven. Behind me, you can see, which way, a little girl whose mother in crisis took her infant newborn daughter to a fire station where she was legally and safely surrendered, and she's now with her adoptive family. How much better that than in a ditch or in a garbage can and in a dumpster? So the reality is, when we have educated our women and people to the tune that babies are property, they're not a human being, that they don't have any rights, then we have women throwing their babies, infants, newborns in garbage cans. We want women to have every option available to them that does not involve the death of their child. And we just have to keep on. And the only way you can keep on that point, Jim, is to keep reminding that what we're talking about is an innocent human person from the moment of conception until natural death. That's the only way you win that argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I guess I won't. I will just to throw it out there. I was going to say I won't even ask you the question because I don't know that there's any answer to it. I don't expect you to have an answer to it necessarily, but maybe you do. And that is, why isn't this already happening in the leadership of the pro-life movement? Why do I even have to say anything about? Why do we have to even be involved in this? Why aren't those who are making a lot of money in major pro-life organizations, why aren't they already doing this? Why aren't they saying this? Why aren't they pushing this? That's not what I'm hearing. That's not what I'm seeing at all. And I really have no good answer. And it's a question that continues to pop up, even though I try to ignore it because it's just frustrating. But any thought to that question? Why aren't we already seeing the most prominent pro-life leaders already pushing in this way?
I think a lot of them for decades bought into the lie that this was a failing. We need to do it the way we've always been doing it. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But I'll say this is, and I might throw some Protestants under the bus here, but the Catholics initially, if you look at the history, were consistently personhood right from 1973 as a whole. They called abortion what it was, the killing of an innocent human being. The Protestants were way slow to the table. Do you know what I mean? They came a decade later, and then by the time they kind of joined in, there was a lot of, but in case, but accept this or accept, and then we began this process. So I think we started there, Jim. I think in 1973, and then we got away from it and went to what was expedient and what would work and what would get money probably and what to give, and then I don't know if they'll go back. To where it was. I mean, Nellie Gray, who founded March for Life, was personhood back in 1973.
Right. And now
she was.
Right. And now it's quite puzzling. Why won't the March for Life even just take it up as a theme? Personhood. Take it up as a theme. You could push this. You could call on President Trump to do an executive order on personhood. DeSantis, they're holding him up as a pro-life hero. He's their main speaker at the March for Life this year. They could call on him to do an executive order on personhood. They're not doing any of that. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel. I'm going to put the phone number out there real quick. I know we're in the last segment, but if you really want to get a call in, we will take one. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And I was thinking we were going to have time to get into the discussion today about more of what's going on in Florida and what's happening with the enforcement, or really lack thereof, with the heartbeat law in Florida, and get into some of those things. But I think we're going to have you back to talk more about that. I really want to get this kind of last topic in and raise this with you today. I'm reading real quick here from a book called Abandoned: The Untold Story of the Abortion Wars by Monica Miller. She's actually going to be on Thursday. We're going to discuss this book, largely about her story in the pro-life movement. But in talking about the history of the pro-life movement, this is back in the 70s here, talking about this group called Women Exploited, and saying that the organization operated as a support group for women who came to regret their abortion. The group believed that abortion not only victimized the unborn, but attacked the intrinsic dignity of women as well. Goes on to talk more about it, but that idea of attacking the intrinsic dignity of women as well makes a lot of sense, right? To be able to twist things to encourage a mom to turn her heart against her own child because of, yes, probably very real, difficult circumstances in her life, but tempting her then to say, you could solve these problems by just getting rid of that problem you have there, that child, right? And this is the devil, right? This is ultimately the devil. But this goes, not only is it murder of the child, it cuts against the very core of the identity of that woman. She is made to love that child, to give of herself for the good of that child living and growing within her. So this lie of abortion, it's mass murdering, but it's also cutting at the very intrinsic dignity of women. This should be clear and common sense. It is when we see these other sort of woke agenda items, and I want to, I guess, throw this out there because, as we talk about the absurdity of men pretending they're women and then playing in women's sports, and we can all see the absurdity of that. It cuts against the dignity of men and women. We should be able to see abortion on this same level as just a common sense principle. But I'm also seeing this. This is April 2024 NBC News. More young people choosing permanent sterilization after abortion restrictions. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe, there's been an ongoing increase in adults ages 18 to 30 who undergo tubal ligation or vasectomy, new research shows. October 2024, Scientific American, more men are getting vasectomies since Roe was overturned. A recent study shows Supreme Court ruling led to a sharp increase in people, particularly younger, single individuals seeking a vasectomy or a tubal sterilization procedure. Last Thursday, the Washington Post, surge in Americans getting sterilizations, given the state's abortion laws. Interest in tubal ligations and vasectomies has skyrocketed in the past 2 years, according to research and healthcare providers. So look, these are evils as well that cut against the dignity of the people that are mutilating themselves in these ways. This is against the sexual integrity we're made for. But I guess while we fight the good fight on forming good culture around the root issue of a right understanding of human anthropology, human sexuality, it's a better place to be if someone wants to exercise sexual license and misuse the marital embrace outside of marriage. Our laws need to demonstrate clearly that it does not give you permission to kill an innocent child if conceived. So my body, my choice doesn't hold up when your choice is killing someone else's body, and the ongoing daily mass murder has to end. So we're pushing for this. We're seeing kind of this weird reaction to it. I know you spoke of something similar at the last Men's March, a campaign that was going on that pro-abortion women had come up with. I guess what's your thought as getting to, is this all inevitably, I guess this long arc towards justice, is this all inevitably getting to the point where this will all be seen as common sense? This was all crazy, including abortion as part of this craziness. And eventually people are going to see this is against common sense. This is against the dignity of human beings. Is it inevitable? Are we pushing that direction? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are, but the more truth that is spoken, we'll get there. I think what you just said about the vasectomies and the tubal, one of the things that they've been saying is, and I was watching this very closely, is that they're saying, well, those are reversible, which I find fascinating because it's the exact same argument they give for sterilizing 14-year-olds men who believe they're boys who think they're girls, and women and doing double mastectomies on young women. It's the same argument that it's reversible, that if you change your mind 10 years from now, you can just reverse that back. And sadly, we know that is most likely not true. So it's Satan's attack on God's creation. It's Satan's ultimate attack on the human being. He can't get at God himself. So where does he go? He goes and attacks the image of God in man. And this is all part of his big plan. But the other issue here with the whole, the sterilization and all of that is that it is ultimately selfish. Right? It is ultimately my, me, mine, I, and I don't want my life interrupted by another human person. I don't want my lifestyle to change. I don't want to have to give of myself to this other person. It's all about me, how I feel, and they have become the center of their universe. And what happens is, Jim, and it's Romans 1, they have rejected their creator, worshiped the creation, and they have put themselves in the place of God. So now they get to play God about their reproduction, about their relationships, about who they have to answer to, and it's really become that an alternate religion, and it is ultimately the religion of self. Abortion is at its core selfish. adoption at its core is selfless, right? I'm willing to take on all the pain to do what's best for my child. That is selflessness. Abortion is ultimate selfishness. It's me. I want my body. I don't want I can't take care of it. I can't. And so what you're seeing with all this vasectomy and all this screaming about their rights is they're just saying, I don't want to have to answer in my life for anyone else. And they're not getting married now, Jim. This generation, they're not marrying because they don't want that responsibility to a spouse. They don't want to take on those responsibilities, and they're not having children. And the sad thing is, that a society doesn't last if everybody does that, right? We have to have more faith. That's why our good families that embrace family and marriage and children, and as my grandpa used to say, blessed is the man whose quiver is full, because he had 12 children and 89 grandchildren and still counting. When the folks that embrace that ethic, and that is in line with the image of God and our Creator, we're going to be the only ones procreating. So the rest of them are going to extinct themselves off the face of the earth. So that's going to happen.
And look, I think we're probably quite a number of years, if we ever get there, of a rightly ordered understanding of human sexuality really taking root back again in the culture, and where people would see, even the evils of sterilization and vasectomies, these things, right? But I think we're probably a far way from there. But look, in the meantime, if you want to be selfish, right, and that's what you want to choose to do, I guess, okay, you have the right to do that, but gone ought to be the days when you're going to exercise sexual license, and then a child is conceived, and then you're going to say, this is not really a human being, and I'm going to murder this child, right? Our laws need to be clear. That is not acceptable. And that's not something we need to wait for. That needs to be something our laws reflect today. That is not acceptable. We will not let you murder innocent human beings. And that's for your own good as well, for your own dignity. Pam, last word as we're running out here.
Absolutely. That's where you stand on the truth and the dominoes will fall. And we've got to say that murdering innocent children is wrong. Always. Every time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pam, thank you so much. What a wonderful spokesperson you are for the preborn, for the pro-life movement. EnlightenCom.com. God bless you all.